Ardern. It was the first and practically the only thing people wanted to talk about when AUT marketing expert Dr. Jacinda Ardern was in Canada recently. But while the Prime Minister has been praised internationally, back home the criticisms of her leadership keep coming. So what effect does her global brand have on New Zealand? Jessica joins us now to explain. Good morning.
Good morning.
So was I exaggerating then in the intro, or is Jacinda the only thing people wanted to talk about?
That probably was the first thing that people would say to me when I explained that I was living in New Zealand. I was overseas for research and study leave for the last 6 months in Canada and Australia, and same thing in both countries. Probably the first thing was, I love your Prime Minister.
Why? Why do they love her so much?
I think a lot of it has to do with, the international brand overseas is quite different, like you said, from what people are perceiving here domestically. Internationally, the brand is focused a lot more on the overall image, less on sort of the details of the politics within that same country. So they're seeing, the positive responses to the Christchurch mosque attacks, and they're seeing sort of this quite different leadership being shown in this part of the world. Again, if we were to do, say, a brand mapping exercise and place her quotes brand next to competitors, if we want to call them that, leaders around the world, her position is quite distinctly different from a lot of other leaders that we're seeing. So internationally, they're seeing, I think, that difference and that juxtaposition against what they might be perceiving either within their own countries. Although in Canada, it was interesting that was still something that people would say, even though Canada arguably probably has one of the more similar types of leaders as well, someone through Trudeau that's equally progressive and accessible to the public. But again, that sort of reinforces that international versus domestic change. So in Canada, they're a lot more, critical of Trudeau for internal politics and things he's doing with regards to First Nations and energy crisis in Canada. But yet they think that Jacinda Ardern is doing a great job, but they don't necessarily know about, the land occupation.
And they don't have to worry about that, because
right.
They don't live here in New Zealand.
Right.
So what good is having such a great international brand for New Zealand? Is it actually going to help us?
Definitely. I mean, there's different roles. So like you said, obviously all of the internal politics are important. It's important, for the nuts and bolts of the running of a country, but having a strong international brand is also important for things like international trade, for tourism, for investment in the country in other ways. And also just the benefit that New Zealand sort of is in those ranks of being a world leader and being perceived as a country overall that's quite progressive, that is led by the Prime Minister, but that sort of translates to the perception about the country as well.
So if people like her for being progressive, could that actually work against New Zealand when it comes to trade talks and international diplomacy when working with countries who aren't so progressive?
Potentially. I mean, she's definitely having to walk that line between how to engage and stay true to what she's sort of saying are her brand values and her the associations she wants to be known for, but yet of course a lot of these conversations internationally are happening with people and other leaders that may not hold those same values. So I think she definitely has a challenge in terms of how to uphold her own values and what she is standing for, if you will, but still being able to work with others that might see things differently.
Is her international fame, for want of a better word, possibly going to propel her into different leadership roles in the future, maybe international leadership roles within the UN or something similar?
It's possible. I guess time will tell. I think she also, she kind of has two brands, if you will, that she's got in her portfolio at the moment in terms of her role as Prime Minister, but also a personal brand and who she is as Jacinda, who she is in terms of a leader and a role model for young people in terms of careers and being, women in professions, but also being mothers, being partners. And so those sorts of qualities might also be things that could be perceived to be quite positive for a leader in a higher capacity as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insight. That's Dr. Jacinda Ardern.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely fascinating issue, this, isn't it?
It
the macro
is.
versus the micro, and what we want domestically versus what the world wants to see.
Yep.
And it plays into the world's narrative about New Zealand anyway, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Positive carryover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting interesting what you said about Canada, though, because they do have Justin Trudeau.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Apparently
Yeah.
is meant to be progressive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Within his own country,
Yep.
they're like,
Yeah.
sorry,
But we
you're
like
getting-
what you've got, but here,
Yeah, the
we're
grass
not
is
so
greener,
sure.
right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fascinating.